There is a moment that almost nobody talks about. Not the moment they pull away. Not the moment they go quiet. Not the moment you stare at your phone, reread the last message, and feel your stomach drop into that old, familiar emptiness. I mean the moment after that. The moment when you are sitting in the silence they created, and every cell in your body is screaming to break it, to reach out, to explain yourself better, to be softer, calmer, less emotional, less needy, less human. The moment when their absence becomes louder than any words they ever gave you. And suddenly, you are not just missing them. You are abandoning yourself in real time, trying to keep someone close who only knows how to love from a distance. That is the moment everything flips. Because what you call love in that moment is often panic. What you call effort is often fear. And what you call fighting for the connection is sometimes the very thing that kills it. That is the brutal truth. The more you chase an avoidant when they withdraw, the more you become the container for the emotions they cannot hold. Your texts become their relief. Your pleading becomes their escape hatch. Your availability becomes the evidence that they do not have to confront what is actually happening inside them. So while you think you are saving the bond, you are often shielding them from the consequences of their own emotional avoidance. And that is why they leave calm while you break apart. Because you are doing the feeling for both of you. You are carrying the ache, the uncertainty, the overthinking, the longing, the grief, the emotional labor of keeping the thread alive. They get to step back. You get flooded. Their nervous system gets distance. Yours gets dysregulated. This is why it feels so cruel. Because to you, love means moving closer when something feels fragile. But to an avoidant nervous system, closeness under emotional pressure can feel like danger. Not because they do not care. And this matters. Not because they are cold, not because you imagined the tenderness, but because intimacy, especially when it asks something real of them, can overload the system they built to survive. The amygdala does not care that you had a beautiful night together. It does not care that they miss you. It does not care that part of them wants to stay. It detects intensity, expectation, vulnerability, loss of control. And when that threat signal goes off, the body reacts before the heart can explain itself. Cortisol rises, muscles tighten, breathing shallows. The nervous system shifts from connection into self-protection. Their brain starts translating closeness into pressure, your emotions into demands, your need for reassurance into a trap they fear they will not know how to escape. So they do what they have always done. They detach. They delay. They numb. They disappear just enough to breathe again. And you, on the other side of that wall, make the mistake so many loving people make. You interpret distance as proof that they never cared. But often that is not the truth. The truth is more painful than that. They cared, and it overwhelmed them. They felt something, and it asked for a version of them they have spent years avoiding. They wanted closeness, but not the vulnerability that comes with staying. They wanted you, but not the mirror you held up. They wanted the warmth, the softness, the emotional home. But when that home started feeling real, when they sensed expectation, consistency, accountability, the possibility of being truly known, the old wiring lit up. And they ran from the intensity of what they felt, not the absence of it. That is why avoidance can look so confusing. They lean in, then vanish. They open up, then shut down. They act invested, then suddenly act untouched. It is not always a game. Sometimes it is a war inside their body. One side says, "Stay here, this matters." The other side says, "If you stay, you will lose freedom, lose control, lose yourself, get swallowed, get disappointed, get exposed." And when that inner war reaches a threshold, they choose distance, because distance feels like power. Which brings us to the one thing almost nobody understands: silence. Not the performative kind, not silence as manipulation, not silence used as a cheap tactic to make them miss you. Real silence. The kind that happens when you stop rescuing the dynamic. The kind that begins when you refuse to chase someone into emotional availability. The kind that says, without saying a word, "I will not keep bleeding just to prove I care." That silence is where everything changes. Because as long as you keep reaching, the pressure stays on you. You become the emotional engine. You keep the story moving. You provide the dopamine spike of reassurance, the relief of knowing they still have access to you, the comfort of unfinished business without real accountability. They do not have to feel the full weight of your absence because you never truly leave the room. But when you go silent in a grounded way, not from rage, but from self-respect, something happens inside them that they cannot control. First comes relief. Yes, relief. This is the part most people cannot accept. At first, your silence may feel good to them. The nervous system unclenches, the urgency drops, the perceived pressure fades. They tell themselves this is better, easier, cleaner. They distract, they work, they scroll, they sleep a little better. Their body mistakes distance for peace. And if you panic during that stage and break the silence, you reset the cycle. You confirm their belief that they can withdraw and still keep you emotionally orbiting around them. But if you do not come back right away, if the usual message does not arrive, if your energy actually leaves, relief slowly turns into something else. Space. Then uncertainty. Then disturbance. Because the avoidant pattern depends on a quiet assumption: you will still be there. Maybe not happy, maybe not fulfilled, maybe not secure, but there. Available for the next half-open door. Available for the next vague apology. Available for the next, "I've just been dealing with a lot." Available for the next low-effort return that asks you to forget what your body remembers. When your silence breaks that assumption, their nervous system starts losing the structure it relied on. And this is when they enter panic mode. Not always dramatically, not always immediately, not always in a way you can see. Avoidants do not usually panic like anxious attachers panic. They do not always call crying. They do not always confess. They do not always write the long, vulnerable paragraph the movie version of you keeps waiting for. Their panic is often colder than that, quieter, more internal, more obsessive. It sounds like, why haven't they reached out? It feels like checking your story but not liking it, typing your name and deleting it, replaying your last conversation while pretending they are over it, feeling irritated that you seem fine, feeling strangely hollow at night, getting hit by memories in places that used to feel neutral, wondering if you were talking to someone else, thinking they needed space, only to realize space is not the same thing as emotional safety. because now there is no pressure from you. Only the sound of their own attachment wound echoing back at them. And that is a sound they have spent a lifetime avoiding. This is where the power dynamic quietly reverses. Not because you manipulated them, because you finally stopped over-functioning. When you stop chasing, they lose the external proof that they are still desired without effort. The dopamine they got from your pursuit starts fading. The certainty begins to rot. And in that uncertainty, the feelings they suppressed can rise to the surface. They begin to miss not just your attention, but your regulation, your warmth, your steadiness, your softness. The way your presence made their inner chaos feel temporarily organized. They miss the emotional home they kept running from. And because avoidants are often disconnected from their own needs in real time, they usually do not understand this at first. They just feel restless, off, flat, agitated. Their body knows something is missing before their mind admits who it is. That is when the little movements begin. A reaction, a view, a random check-in, a breadcrumb message wrapped in casual language. "Hey, just thought of you. Hope you're doing well. How have you been?" Small words, but underneath them is a much bigger question. Do I still have access to you? Can I still enter your world without facing what I did to it? Are you still the same person I left behind? And this is the moment most people lose everything they just reclaimed. Because the message comes in and the old chemistry wakes up. Dopamine surges, the body lights up. Hope rushes in dressed like destiny. You tell yourself this means they finally realized your value. You answer too fast, too warmly, too gratefully. And without meaning to, you rush back into the old emotional position. Available, relieved, open, waiting. You break the pattern before it breaks open. Listen carefully. If your silence was only a strategy to get them back, they will feel that. Maybe not consciously, but the nervous system always knows. If your silence is full of hidden desperation, if every hour of no contact is secretly a performance meant to trigger pursuit, then the energy is still hooked. You are still orienting your life around their response, and that means they still hold the center. Real silence is different. Real silence is when your life begins moving again. When your body stops living in anticipation. When your worth is no longer hanging from the sound of one person's phone lighting up. When you let them feel the absence of you without rushing in to save them from it. That is why it works. Not because silence is magic, because self-abandonment is over. Picture it. They wake up and instinctively check for your name. Nothing. They post something half calculated, half curious. You do not bite. They remember the way you used to soften when they reached out, but now there is no easy entry point. They tell themselves they are fine, but your absence is becoming specific. It has shape, texture, consequence. The coffee shop you liked, the song you sent, the hour of night when you were usually available, the emotional certainty they took for granted. Now all of it is gone at once. And suddenly, they are not just avoiding closeness, they are confronting loss. That is when missing you becomes visceral. Not romantic, visceral. The body starts registering what the ego denied. Appetite shifts. Sleep gets strange. Attention fragments. Their mind circles back to you at inconvenient times. They feel the impulse to reach, then argue with themselves, then reach halfway, then retreat again. This is why avoidants can look inconsistent when they start feeling your absence. One day they come closer, the next day they seem distant again. It is not always because they are playing with you. It is because longing and fear are colliding in the same nervous system. They want contact, but contact wakes up vulnerability. They miss you, but missing you threatens the identity they built around not needing anyone. So if they come back, and you immediately hand them the old version of you, the one who was waiting, aching, over-explaining, over-giving, they calm down again. The panic passes, the lesson disappears, nothing changes. But if they come back and find someone who is warm yet unhooked, open yet no longer available for crumbs, loving yet deeply anchored in self-respect, then the old script stops working. And this is where true transformation begins. Because now they are not just dealing with your absence, they are dealing with your evolution. Now they have to face something they never expected. The version of you they could distance from without consequence no longer exists. You no longer beg for clarity from someone committed to confusion. It is in becoming unavailable for the version of love that asks you to betray yourself. And the moment that becomes real, truly real, everything changes inside you. You start sleeping differently, breathing differently, thinking differently. Their silence no longer sounds like your unworthiness. Their distance no longer feels like proof that you were too much. Their inconsistency no longer hypnotizes you into earning what should be given freely. You begin to see clearly. They were not always detached because you were lacking. They were often detached because closeness touched something unhealed in them. And you were not hard to love. You were hard to stay emotionally asleep beside. That is the shift. The one that turns grief into dignity, confusion into discernment, longing into standards. So if you are in that silence now, if you are fighting the urge to reach for someone who keeps reaching away, let this land in the part of you that is tired of surviving on almost. Your silence is not weakness. Your stillness is not failure. Your refusal to chase is not losing them. It is how you stop losing yourself. And if that absence finally forces them to feel what they ran from, let them feel it. Let them sit in the emptiness they kept handing to you. Let them meet the sound of their own avoidance without your love cushioning the blow. Let them wonder. Let them miss. Let them confront. Not because revenge is powerful, because reality is. And maybe they will rise. Maybe they will learn. Maybe they will come back with more truth than fear. But whether they do or not, your life can no longer be built around waiting for someone else's nervous system to stop seeing intimacy as danger. That chapter ends when you decide that your love is not a rescue mission, that your heart is not a rehabilitation center for the emotionally unavailable, that your softness is sacred, that your presence is earned through reciprocity, not extracted through endurance. And when that identity locks in, something extraordinary happens. You stop asking, when will they enter panic mode? And start living like someone who no longer needs anyone to panic over losing them in order to recognize their value. Because you already do. You know your worth now, not as a slogan, as a standard. You know that the right love will not require you to disappear so someone else can finally feel your importance. You know that peace is not boring. Consistency is not lack of passion. Safety is not the death of chemistry. It is the end of starvation. And from that place, you become unforgettable in the deepest way. Not because you mastered a tactic, because you became whole. Not because you made them chase, because you stopped chasing what could not hold you. Not because they finally saw your value, because you did. That is the real power. That is the real return. That is the moment your nervous system stops confusing pain for connection and starts calling your energy back home. And once you know what home feels like inside yourself, no one gets to make you beg at the door again.